David, a handsome British bachelor, meets Mia, a beautiful Australian girl in Tuvalu, and they instantly fall in love. Out of the blues, and with no knowledge of each other, David proposes to Mia and she accepts. He flies back to England to inform his 3 bachelor friends, and is embarrassed when he walks into a surprise welcome back party, totally naked. One of his friends, Luke, is suffering from heartbreak because his love, Sarah, left him for another man. Tom and Graham try to make David feel better about the most embarrassing incident that just occurred at the welcome party. When they ask him about his trip to Australia, he tells them about his upcoming wedding, and they are the least excited friends anyone could have. Tom believes holiday flings shouldn't end at the altar, and they are not pleased to hear the wedding will take place in Australia. David reminds them that he is orphaned and they are his family, so the bachelors book a flight to Australia. As they travel, David is excited to meet Mia's family for the first time. Luke is still mourning his breakup and keeps calling Sarah, and Tom and Graham just go with the flow. When they arrive at the airport, they are unexpectedly welcomed by special security, and this makes them nervous. David finds out the first thing about Mia's family. Her dad is a senator and they are wealthy. Maureen, the woman in charge, leads them to a VIP room for check-in, and from there, to the parking lot. David is excited to meet Mia and introduces her to all his friends. Tom informs David that they will be going with a different vehicle and can find their way. As they try to follow the map, Luke and Graham find out that Tom had a different plan all along. Tom had led them to the address of a drug dealer to get stash for the bachelor's night. Luke is too heartbroken to go in with them, so Tom takes Graham, who hates the idea, with him. They meet Ray, an extremely weird dealer who gets them to taste the drugs before handing them over, and eventually they spend time listening to his weird stories, and Graham is really terrified. Ray takes a special interest in Graham and asks if they can have dinner together the next day, but while Graham wants to disagree, Tom gives out Graham's business card. They leave hastily and Graham picks the nearest available bag, thinking it was the one he brought in. Meanwhile, David meets Barbara, Mia's mom, and Daphne, her sister, who claims she is a lesbian, to get her dad off her back. Barbara is welcoming, but Mia's father, Senator Jim, makes David feel pressured by telling him the caliber of people that will be at the wedding, and claiming that Mia is going to be a senator too. David is introduced to Ramsey, a sheep that Jim greatly adores and Daphne refers to as her father's son. Finally, later that day, David's friends, who locate the house, and Mia's family meet and talk over a meal, which Graham makes awkward when he vomits on his plate. After dinner, David asks his friends to behave properly and warns them about getting him high the night to his wedding. But they get really high and David wakes up to find Ramsey in his room on the morning of his wedding. Last night, they were so high and didn't know when they went to meet Ramsey and took it with them. David successfully hides Ramsey from Barbara, who comes to greet him and offer assistance in the morning. Nervous about the caliber of guests arriving and angry at his friends, David asks them to return Ramsey before anyone notices. When he steps out dressed, he meets Jim, who asks him to speak with a man called Eddie Marshall and impress him. According to Jim, Eddie holds the key to a great wedding gift, but David did not know what he was talking about. Tom prepares Ramsey to be returned and Graham is shocked when he opens his bag to get the groomsman's suit. He realizes he took the wrong bag and left his own bag at Ray, the drug dealer's house. The problem was Ray's bag contained wrapped in condoms, a gun, an iron, and a terrifying doll with a knife in her head. Tom calls Ray to apologize but is taken to voicemail, so he drops a message for Ray and is frequently interrupted by a nervous Graham. They steal one of Jim's suits and Graham puts it on for the wedding. Just before David walks down the aisle, he hands Tom his phone and instructs him to play a video when he signals to him and asks that Ramsey is returned before the reception. Unfortunately, Luke is really drunk as the wedding starts, so Graham drops him in the front seat of a car. The big moment is here, and Mia walks down the aisle as Daphne plays the violin terribly. Everything seems to be under control until sleepy Luke puts the car in gear and it starts rolling down straight to the field of the wedding. It wrecks everything in its path and causes chaos, but luckily, Mia and David have already exchanged their vows and are married. Mia takes the incident in good faith, but Jim is embarrassed and asks David to deal with his friend. David scolds Luke, who keeps doing embarrassing things because he is drunk, and Graham takes him to the room inside the house and leaves him on the bed, not noticing Ramsey was also in there. Tom then asks Graham to take the best man speech since Luke is drunk and he freaks out. Mia encourages David not to feel bad about his friends, and in unity, they walk into their reception happy. Meanwhile, Ray gets the message on the answering machine and is shocked to find that all his drugs are gone. To make things worse, the network doesn't deliver the message clearly, and all Ray hears is Tom insulting him, which is not what Tom sent. Ray is livid and heads to the address on the wedding invitation card he found in the bag Graham had dropped. Jim informs Barbara at the reception about his plans to vacate his seat as senator for Mia. He had invited Eddie, so the man could see how amazing Mia would be as a senator. But Barbara is not pleased. because Jim hadn't asked Mia if she wanted to be a senator and she walks out of the reception. Tom and Graham argue in Jim's office about the best man speech and what Graham will say when called upon. They sniff cocaine and Barbara walks in on them at that moment, but because she has been angered by Tom, Barbara takes the cocaine and they all get really high. Maureen tells Jim that Eddie, his most important guest, was getting bored, so he invites Graham for the best man speech. Graham is so nervous and high that he messes up the speech by talking about sex and the colonization of Australia and England. Jim saves the day by abruptly ending Graham's speech and accepts Maureen's idea of displaying Ramsey, but as luck would have it, Maureen reports that Ramsey is missing and David overhears this. He excuses himself minutes to the bridal waltz and drags all his friends along back to the room to return Ramsey. When they arrive, they do not find Ramsey anywhere. Panicking, David asks them to sort it out before he returns from the waltz. He rushes off to meet. Jim seeks the help of Commissioner Leo to find his beloved Ramsey, who he believes has been stolen by people in the wedding. Meanwhile, Ray arrives at the wedding venue dressed in the suit found in Graham's bag, the one he left when he mistakenly took the drugs. Back in the room, Luke is totally sleepy and is of no help to Graham and Tom, who find Ramsey and are horrified to see him eating the drugs wrapped in condoms. They force laxatives into Ramsey's mouth and Graham does the dirty job of sticking his hands into it but to remove the condoms. As they are passed out, Barbara keeps embarrassing herself because she is drunk and Mia begins to suspect David when he takes an excuse to use the toilet. He rushes back to the room and finds out about the drugs and weed. The three of them do their best and finally, Graham gets all the cocaine out of Ramsey's butt. David is relieved and heads out of the room to find Luke attempting to commit suicide. He talks Luke out of it with the aid of Tom and Graham, who come into the room. But it keeps going from one problem to another because Ramsey faints immediately. Realizing they have to give CPR, David sits on Ramsey and Graham tries to help, but Mia, who came looking for David, finds him in an awkward position. David tries to explain to her as she walks away, but she asks him to sort everything out because she doesn't understand what's happening. David gets back to Tom angry and they end up arguing with each other. Tom feels that David is leaving them just like that and David feels that Tom isn't supportive of his wedding, and the guys want to screw it up. He tells Tom that the guys are his mates and not his family. Meanwhile, Ray finds Graham, who is taking a bath from sticking his hands in Ramsey's butt. Ray is livid at first, but Graham calms him down by reminding him about their dinner date. But Tom sees them from the slightly open door and knocks Ray unconscious with a vase. He didn't know that Graham had settled things with Ray, so together they dump Ray in a small house at the top of the roof and lock him in with his gun. After coinciding with Jim and Leo, who are still looking for Ramsey, David heads back to the guys to find a way to return Ramsey without being seen. They decide to lower it through the window since they can't take it through the front of the house. As they are doing this, Jim and Leo meet David and Tom and take them in for questioning about Ramsey because they suspect them. Luke, whom David was able to wake, lowers Ramsey past the window of the room David and Tom are being interrogated. Finally, Ramsey is returned to its place and the boys are relieved. Maureen spots Ramsey in his cage and Jim asks her to release him for display even though everyone is surprised about its sudden return. The wedding is slowly getting better as David is called to give his speech. Nervous a little as everyone turns their attention to him, he reads from a paper and thanks the planners and his in-laws, and asks Tom to play the video to surprise Mia. But Tom plays the wrong video, which shows them drunk and stealing Ramsey the previous night. Jim confronts David about stealing his sheep but is interrupted when Ray storms in almost naked with a gun and yells for his cocaine. Everyone takes a defensive position and Commissioner Leo points a gun to Ray's head asking him to lower his gun. Ray turns to face him and the long-separated father and son duo are surprised to see each other. Mia sobs in her room and is comforted by Daphne and Barbara, who is now sober, while Jim scolds the guys outside. David tries to convince him of his sincerity and the fact that the guys are his family, but Jim does not buy it and states that everything is over. The guys walk back defeated and plan how they will heal and grow old together, but David gets an idea when Tom hands him the phone with the video. Jim, on the other hand, tries to comfort Mia by telling her he is retiring and giving his senator seat to her. David tries to get Mia's attention by throwing stones at her window till she finally notices. He apologizes and throws her the phone to watch the video, and she watches the correct video he had made on the island where they had met earlier. He had used the money his parents left for him to buy the beach for his family with Mia. Mia is touched by this when she watches the video and heads downstairs to meet David, telling her father she is destined to be with David. They make up and hug each other and the wedding celebrations continue in full swing. Daphne and Graham, who had been developing a connection, end up kissing each other. And Barbara and Luke are no longer drunks while Ray and his dad, Commissioner Leo, make up. In the evening, Tom and David have a heart-to-heart and apologize to each other. The guys enjoy a beautiful moment of friendship and in the end, everything is perfect. Thanks for watching. Check out this movie here. And don't forget to subscribe and to turn on the notification bell.